Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas, here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Hey guys, thank you so much for rejoining us here on Law for the People. I want to thank our guest, Ramiro Luna, for coming on and talking with us a little bit earlier about his take on this SB4. We're going to have another incredibly important guest coming up, State Representative from 103, Mr. Rafael Anchia. And we're going to play a little bit of his tape that he gave a speech down on the House floor after SB4 was passed by the House and before it was signed by the governor. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to explain what it is we're talking about with respect to SB4 and why we have some real concerns among not only the undocumented in our country, but quite honestly as Latinos in general. What I think initially happened was Governor Abbott, Governor Abbott came out with a mandate before the legislative session began. And he said, you know, we want to attack these sanctuary cities. He kind of defined sanctuary cities as those places that did not adhere, those sheriffs who didn't adhere to what are called ICE detainers. And what an ICE detainer is basically ICE asking a local sheriff to hold someone beyond the period in which they should be in jail. For example, Fern, you get arrested. They take you down, and let's say you get arrested for tickets, and I hope you don't have any outstanding tickets out there, but let's say you get arrested for tickets. They take you down, they put you in jail for a period of time. You know, you get someone to come and pay those tickets off. So theoretically, you should be let go. But then ICE sends a request, hey, we want to hold this guy. Hold him for us for a period of time until we go pick him up. Now, the problem with that is these are civil detainers. They're not criminal detainers. If it was a criminal detainer, then that would mean that a judge had probably heard about it, listened to it, said, okay, there's probable cause to hold this individual. We're going to honor those criminal detainers. And we do that every day. I mean, the sheriffs down in just about any locality, they receive a criminal detainer. They're going to hold that person until whatever authority is going to pick them up will pick them up, because they're judicially determined to have probable cause. A judge or a magistrate had to make that determination. These are civil detainers. Big distinction. There is no judge hearing these to determine whether or not there's probable cause to hold this person. That can be incredibly offensive to the Fourth Amendment. They can't hold you or detain you. There is a presumption of innocence until proven guilty in this country, and with that, you're entitled to make bail, you're entitled to be free, you're entitled to not be detained. If you start with that, those are constitutional protections. If they issue a civil detainer, they're basically saying, okay, we haven't issued probable cause, we haven't made that determination, but hold them anyway. With that, a number of sheriffs, a number of jurisdictions are actually being sued by individuals who are being held on these detainers, these civil detainers, in violation of the Fourth Amendment. There is no doubt that they've held a number of United States citizens for extended periods of time, U.S. citizens. That's where they really get popped. You had no ability to hold this person, yet you did it. So this is kind of where this stemmed from. So some sheriffs, in addition to that, these civil ICE detainers are totally voluntary. The federal government has to make them totally voluntary, otherwise they could violate the 10th Amendment. And what's the 10th Amendment? 10th Amendment basically says the federal government cannot make states, which under that would be municipalities or governmental entities under the state, they can't make them do the function of the federal government. So we can't force them to even adhere to these ICE detainers. Otherwise, that would be a violation of the 10th Amendment. So that is where the whole issue comes in. In addition to that, sheriffs, police chiefs, others have come out and said that this is incredibly unsafe. And it's unsafe not only for the undocumented, who can be victims of crimes. Can you imagine someone who's just been a victim of a crime going to the police if they believe that the police officer is going to ask them their status. That's why they have these policies in place that they don't ask those questions. They're relatively informal policies, many of them. I know that we have an informal policy with the Dallas Police Department that says you don't ask those immigration questions. There's no need to, because it isn't important in the context of what it is we're doing. So this is why this has become an incredibly evocative issue. That is what I think Governor Abbott wanted to roll out. He had a problem with Sally Hernandez, who is the sheriff of Austin, basically saying, look, we will hold people if they've committed certain felonies, but I'm not going to hold them for misdemeanors, and I'm not going to hold them for other types of felonies, non-serious in nature, because one, we don't have the resources to do it, because the federal government doesn't help you out with this. They don't help you out with the monies that kind of come through to detain people for lengthier periods of time. And it truly makes the communities unsafe. A number of police chiefs around our state came out and said that. This is going to make things unsafe. So that is the issue. So for them to define sanctuary cities along that line, at the very least, I think conceptually people can get that. Well, if you've been arrested, at the very least, I can kind of understand whether or not we should hold someone for deportation if we think they may be undocumented and they've committed a serious crime. I think everybody kind of understands that. And then there's kind of a line there in terms of how far you would go. But that's not what this SB 4 does. Beyond that, beyond what the governor kind of rolled out in the beginning, you're going to hear Rafael talk about why he was so upset. You're going to hear it in his speech and everything else. It went beyond that. It went into what has been called the show me your papers part of SB 4. And what that does is it gives all police officers in the state of Texas the ability to ask that question or to tell an individual who's not only been incarcerated or in jail, that's being detained in jail, but anybody who's been detained. Anybody being detained could be, let's use you again, Fern, as an example. You're walking across the street and you're not doing it at a crosswalk. Police officer sees that, says, hey, what are you doing? You should have crossed at the intersection. You're just jaywalking. Now, that's usually, at worst, a ticket. You get a ticket for that. But what people don't realize is you can be arrested for that. You can be arrested for breaking the law. Most of the time, it's simply a ticket that is given to you, and you go pay the ticket. But you can actually be arrested for that. And because of that, that is a legal detention. I can now detain you. With that detention, the next question could be, hey, where are you from? Are you here legally? Show me your papers. That is what consistently or conceivably happened to every one of us, me included. I look Latino, got a Latino last name. It could easily be that type of situation. And that's what lots of people are up in arms about, that this supposed having people in jail and whether or not we're going to adhere to the ICE detainers is one thing, but this just morphed into something completely different. It really has. It's made Latinos in general a target. And the reason why I say that is, just imagine realistically, who are police officers going to ask that question of? Who are they going to say, hey, show me your papers, show me why you're here legally in this country? Is it going to be, in all honesty, the Anglo with blue eyes and blonde hair? Probably not. It's going to be those individuals who look like Latinos, that perhaps have don't speak English quite as well as someone else. So what we're going to see is a number of situations where racial profiling is on the uptick. There is just no doubt about it. And I don't care how often the governor can get on Spanish news and say, well, I've got a wife who's a Latina, and I would not pass a bill or sign a bill that's not true. It's simply not true. He better watch out for his wife when she's out there and someone asks for her papers, because it's a very good possibility that could happen. Because there's no other reference point. Unless you're asking everybody that you detain to show me your papers, it's going to be used in such a way that racial profiling is just going to be rampant. So this is the big concern, not only for the undocumented, but for Latinos in general, and it's something that we need to really look at and be awoken to. So that's kind of what that morphed into. There's some other issues with respect to some of the other things that are out there with this bill. With that said, we're going to go ahead and play for you Rafael's response to SB 4 on the House floor. It's incredibly emotional, incredibly evocative. I want you guys to listen to it, and then after that, we're going to have an opportunity to speak with Rafael in person. He's currently on the House floor. They're in session right now. So we're going to play that for you, and then after that, we're going to have our interview with Rafael.
Chair recognizes Representative Anchia in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Yesterday was a very, very emotional and difficult day for me. I didn't plan on speaking today at all, but I felt that we had to bring some closure to this discussion on the Sanctuary Cities bill. So I spent some time in the back today. It's been very hard for me to look at any of you because I'm filled with a lot of sadness and I want to be candid with you, a lot of anger about this bill. And I sat in the back and tried to compose my thoughts and come up with something befitting what I think the gravity of today is. And I came across this quote. It was a very interesting quote about immigrants. Quote, "Few of the children in the country learn English. The signs in our streets have inscriptions in both languages, and unless the stream of their importation could be turned, they will soon outnumber us. That all the advantages that we have will not be able to preserve even our language, and even our form of government will become precarious." That fearful statement, does that sound familiar? Do you ever hear that about immigrants overrunning us? Nobody speaks English. Well, that quote came from Benjamin Franklin in the 1750s when he was talking about German immigrants. In fact, immigrants that I'm willing to bet at some level are the ancestors of many of the people in this room. Same kinds of things have been said about generation of immigrants, whether they're Czechs here in Texas. I know Kyle Casal is Czechoslovakian. Swedes or Scandinavians, Representative Larson. Italians, Representative Capriglione. Poles, and countless others who emigrated to this country and this state. And while even some of our founding fathers could not resist these anti-immigrant impulses, our great nation has always been drawn back together by our better angels. And our nation has always been guided by that lamp that beckons to the world, that stands in New York Harbor, and it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse, not the best and brightest, the wretched refuse from your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me, and I lift my lamp at the golden door." Yet on the House floor yesterday, the discussion about immigrants was about illegal aliens and lawbreakers, criminals. I got to tell you, members, I don't know what part of Texas you all represents, and I can't speak for your communities, but I see a very different picture in the community that I represent. In the end, we're talking about human beings. They're created in God's image, members. We invoke God on a regular basis on this House floor, and these immigrants, be they documented and undocumented, are created in God's image. And members, they're the finest people I've ever met. In fact, the immigrants to this country commit crimes at materially lower rates than even our native-born Americans, but you would not know that from the discussion that we had on the House floor yesterday. You would have no idea that that was the case. You know, I greet these undocumented immigrants in my community as fellow parents who, like my immigrant parents, are doing everything in their power to give their kids a better life. There are people in our churches, and they've breathed life into declining congregations all over this state. And they sing hallelujah, hallelujah to God at the top of their lungs. They're entrepreneurs who are building impressive businesses as generations of immigrants have done before them. And most days, these are the people who you walk by without giving a second glance. They're the lady that you walked by this morning who was mopping the floor, the people who were doing yard work as you drove in, and the people who build our cities and our roads in the hot Texas sun. Some of you might even employ them. In fact, I will repeat a self-evident truth that this country was not built upon a Puritan work ethic. This country was built on an immigrant work ethic. And that is all good. But the message that we are sending from this body, we are sending it loud and clear today, is that once your work is done, you and your families had better stay in the shadows. Because don't forget this, we the powerful are telling you we will pick you up. We value your work during the day, but at night you better be scared because we will pick you up. So every minute these people who live among us, who make our lives better, when they're driving home, they're shopping, they're going to the store, they have to be afraid. They have to be ashamed. They have to be fearful in the knowledge that their whole lives can be upended at any moment. And yesterday, through our vote, and today's vote, which is a foregone conclusion, we are ensuring that that will continue. That these people will live in constant fear of a sidelong glance from anybody in a uniform. In our cities, even our courthouses and our universities. Now, enough about them. I want to ask you about you. My colleagues here in the House. When we often reflect on the history of the treatment of minorities in this country, we consume it in black and white. 35 millimeter film, grainy, sometimes torn still photos. And we look at these photos and we look at the men and the women in the background. Sometimes they're spitting, sometimes they're cursing, sometimes they're unleashing dogs, sometimes they're aiming water cannons. And we think to ourselves, how could this be? Surely they had kids, they loved their families. And we wonder to ourselves, what could have been in their hearts? Was it hate? Was it fear? The modern day discrimination is far more sophisticated, ladies and gentlemen. You don't see the dogs, you don't see the water cannons. And it's not 35 millimeter, it's digital. And SB4, I fear, is the punctuation on a straight line of discrimination that I've seen in this House since 2011. And yesterday, I was accused of impugning the integrity of the members of the House by pointing out that 6 federal court rulings have found intentional discrimination by this body since 2011. But actually, it's not me saying it. I don't have to say it. It's the record of this House. It's the record of this House leadership. Federal judges have said this. This is not Rafael Anchia. This is not Representative Anchia saying this. 6 different judicial opinions have found intentional discrimination by this House. In Corpus Christi, in San Antonio, and in Washington, D.C. These judges were appointed by Republicans, and they were appointed by Democrats. And that is the record. So when history examines this timeline and this moment, and your kids, maybe your grandkids, see you in the background of some of these photos, will they ask, who were you? How could this be? I know you had kids and loved your family. What was in your heart? Was it fear? Was it anger? Members, if your goal, and I'm not saying this of all of you, but I'm asking, if your goal was to use immigrants for political gain, you have succeeded. If your goal was to strike terror in the hearts of immigrants so that they go home, succeeded. And if your goal was to win yesterday at all costs, you succeeded. As the vanquished in yesterday's battle, I say congratulations, and I hope you're satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for rejoining us today here on Law for the People. As I stated earlier, we're having a wonderful guest here, State Representative from 103, Mr. Rafael Anchia. Rafael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
It's a real honor to have you on here. I know you're down on the House floor as we speak, doing some things there at the legislature. So why don't we just get right into it, because I know you're incredibly busy.
Well, I'm grateful for you making time. For those who are watching or listening, Eric's been one of my mentors over the years, and I'm really grateful to him and all of his support and guidance. So the honor's all mine.
Thank you so much for saying that, Rafael. The other day, you had an opportunity to give an incredibly impassioned speech on the House floor in response to the SB 4. I think there have been thousands of people who've had an opportunity to see it. We just heard it. Our listeners just had an opportunity to hear it. What kind of prompted you? I know it was incredibly emotional, incredibly evocative. What kind of prompted you to give that speech?
You know, things got really bad on the House floor. We thought that there would be an effort to scale back SB 4 so it didn't become that papers, please bill that it became. And I remember thinking that morning, I was so worn out from the debate the night before that I didn't even want to speak. I was beaten down, I was demoralized, I was dejected, I was depressed. But I thought that the discussion needed some closure. And so over the lunch break, I just sat at my desk instead of going over to lunch, and I banged out my comments. And I went to the bill author and I told him, hey, listen, I really think we need to put some sort of closure on this thing, because it's been a really painful experience for a lot of folks. And that's where it came from. It all came from my head and my heart in about a 30-minute time frame as I knocked out those comments.
Rafael, we heard the speech, and we heard the emotion that was kind of coming from that. What you mentioned earlier, I think, was incredibly telling. SB 4 coming from the Senate to the House, everyone thought it was going to be watered down to a certain extent. I think the governor initially was, hey, let's adhere to these ICE detainers. That's what we consider sanctuary cities. You guys need to start adhering to these ICE detainers. And then something incredibly happened with respect to the amendment, Schaefer's amendment, and what appears to be the 11th hour of what was going on, the papers, please portion of what it is you're talking about. How in the world did that kind of evolve? How did that kind of get in front of you guys, and how did that become part of this bill?
Well, I mean, you really had an assault from the Senate and the far right in the House. There was a representative from Tyler who brought an amendment, Representative Schaefer, to take the bill back to the House, to the Senate version, and it was instead of only applying to people who are arrested, it was simply going to apply to essentially everyone who was detained. And as you know from being a lawyer for so long, a detainer can be something as simple as a Terry stop, what we call a Terry stop, which is, hey, come here, ven acá, hijo, I want to talk to you. Are you in this country legally? I mean, that is a detainer. And now the SB 4 Papers, Please amendment by Schaefer got on the bill. We tried to broker a deal so it wouldn't happen. That deal fell apart. The GOP pulled that deal before we were even able to finish our caucus meeting. And they just went ahead and voted for it. I think it was 81-64 in the end on that vote. It was, in my view, a colossal failure in the House for us not to control what was happening there. And yet every Democrat voted against it. Some Republicans, like Jason Villalba of Dallas, also voted against the Schaefer Amendment. But most of the GOP in the House voted for it.
And Rafael, I know you're still in session. I know you still have to kind of work, with these folks. But what you can share with us, Schaefer's a member of the Freedom Caucus, incredibly far right in their thinking, much like the Tea Party, but apparently, at least from my perspective, even a little bit further right in terms of some of the things that they've been doing. Some of the incredible pats on the backs they're giving themselves, like with destroying the opportunity to stop the anti-bullying with respect to the school lunches, things of that nature. What from your perspective, where is this evolution coming from? Where are these guys coming from? I know it's the federal government Freedom Caucus, emulation to a certain extent. But what kind of power do these guys have? What is Strauss doing about reining them in? Is he doing anything? What's your kind of take on what's going on over there?
Well, for the last couple of sessions, the Freedom Caucus has really been on the fringe, and we've been able to defeat them on a regular basis. And, when a Freedom Caucus member would bring an amendment, we'd easily throw up 100 votes against them. But this session has really changed, and that SB4 debate was kind of a watershed moment where they took over the House floor. And for the latter half of this session, they've been in large part running things. There was a period of about a month there where every time they would jump up with the furthest right proposal, they would win. And that included not only the Schaefer Amendment on SB4, but you had an incredible moment when you had an anti-vaxxer Freedom Caucus member who beat a GOP cancer survivor and a GOP family physician on an anti-vaxxer amendment on the House floor, where all of the Republican leadership that was loyal to Strauss just completely collapsed. And there have been a couple other examples like that, especially on issues related to women's health care. They've really exerted a lot more control this session than ever. And, a lot of the leadership that was appointed by Speaker Strauss to committee chairmanship has caved in to a lot of their tactics. And that's one of the big takeaways from this session.
Why do you think that is? Where do you think where they're gaining this strength or their ability to do what it is they're doing?
Well, look, we have to face the reality that this is the same kind of sentiment, whether it's anti-immigrant sentiment or anti-Mexico sentiment, that elected Donald Trump. And he won in the state of Texas by 9 points. And I think my GOP colleagues see that. And they're I don't think they expected it. I think many of them are frightened by it. And I have seen that manifested in their votes on the House floor.
I know that there's been about 3 lawsuits filed. Of course, the first being filed by the state of Texas. Governor Abbott rolls out the declaratory judgment request either the night he signs it or maybe the next morning. So we have that down in Austin. We've got a couple of complaints filed down in San Antonio by El Paso and of course, a response from Austin. Where do you think this is headed with respect to the courts? Do you think this is going to get enjoined? Portions of it will be, or what do you think?
So a couple of notes on that. The first thing is that SB4, the Papers, Please bill, came to the House floor 1 week after a 6th consecutive federal court opinion finding intentional discrimination on behalf of the state of Texas against Latinos and African Americans, either in redistricting or photo ID. These are 2 real fundamental parts of our democracy: access to fair districts where Latinos can elect a person of their choice, and then access to the ballot box for people who may not have this sort of narrow band of IDs that are called for in the photo ID legislation. So after a 6th court opinion finding this by 3 different federal courts in DC, San Antonio, and Corpus, boom, they dropped this Papers, Please bill. And so, I think you have to I think judges need to look at the entire context of what's happening, right? And it used to be that we used to think of discrimination, this is some old-timey newsreels, and this is an ancient history, something that we would only read about in the history books. But this is happening real time. It's happening contemporaneous with my service in the legislature, and candidly, all since 2011. Yeah. And that concerns me significantly. And we fought the good fight, but this is not the first time that a bill like this has passed the House of Representatives. It passed in 2011 as well, when even a worse, what they then called Sanctuary Cities bill, passed that didn't even exempt schools at one point, at one version of that law. And we tried to file amendments here that exempted children and minors from being asked for immigration status, from prohibiting police from asking immigration status in battered women's shelters. I mean, things that should be really, really common sense, and it was all voted down. So, I fear that the worst impulses and instincts in Texans are being appealed to through laws like this, and I'm hopeful that the one institution that so far has held against the presidential and congressional overreach, which are the courts, that they can hold in this instance as well. That's really the only hope we've got.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier Texas, the finding of discriminatory intent with respect to voting rights. I know this is up before, they're trying to make some modifications, put some things together to fix it before it goes to the possibility of us going back under pre-clearance. What's your take on where we're going to be in terms of what that looks like coming out of this session?
So they tried to pass a Band-Aid on the photo ID bill to try to bring it more in line with the interim order by Judge Ramos in Corpus Christi. I attended that most recent hearing, and I don't think it's going to be enough. If you have a photo ID regime that allows people with CHLs to vote, but not people with student IDs, college student IDs to vote, that is a law that makes no sense. And when I testified on this in federal court in Washington, D.C. at the D.C. Circuit, there were two young ladies that testified along with me in that trial, and they were two DISD students, I believe, or Texas public school students. I don't remember if they were DISD or not, but they had their DISD government-issued ID that identified them, and it was sufficient to get them on a plane. It was sufficient to get them through security at the D.C. Circuit Court, but it was insufficient to allow them to exercise their right to vote. And that is a real perverse result. If you have a law where these young ladies who do not drive, do not have driver's licenses, don't have cars, are able to board a plane, get through TSA, and get through federal court security, but can't use it to vote, that's just wrong. And I think Judge Ramos is just going to see that. Okay.
Rafael, I know we got you on the House floor and we're kind of pulling you away from that. Anything that you want to add? I know we are being, in all honesty, we're being attacked as Latinos. Not only our undocumented brothers and sisters, but Latinos in general. I know the state of Texas and the legislature has done a whole lot of things to continue that attack. We need to change that as Latinos, the people listening in today. My whole thing is we need to do it at the ballot box. Tell me what are some other things that we need to be looking at, what we need to be doing to unify, kind of come together and attempt to fix. Maybe not this year or next, but soon. What would you have to say or advise the listeners here?
Well, there are going to be 100 days of resistance now. It's just going to be a summer of resistance against SB4. You've got multiple fronts. I mean, we've opened up a front now in the courts. There are going to be protests and marches and activation of the community. We need for people to wake up. And if they're not awake now after the executive orders by the president, the campaign that the president ran, calling us rapists and criminals, and saying a judge of Mexican American descent was unfit to serve because of his herencia, his ancestry. If that didn't get you awake or woke, as the kids say these days, then you better be awake now, because SB4 is going to be the law of Texas in September unless we win in court. And 2018 is an important mile marker. We've got elections coming up. There'll be midterm elections. And that's going to be a referendum on what's happening both federally and at the state level in the state of Texas. We're going to have some good candidates running who are going to reject these politics of fear and hatred. And I hope people get out to support them. If you're a Latino in Texas and you're not awake right now, then you are perpetually asleep.
Yeah, Rafael, totally unsolicited, and just my personal take. It's people like you. I know a lot of what's going on is being allowed. The governor's mandate to do certain things and pass certain legislation. We need it at the top. Of course, the legislature, but from the top, the governor, our lieutenant governor. All these folks are saying certain things and trying to direct what it is we're doing in a certain way. For me, I've always admired you certainly as a leader within the Latino community, but as a politician, the intelligence that you express, the remembering who you are and where you come from. I'm just going to kind of throw it out there. I want to see you be governor someday. I want to see you be running for that office and helping us get where we need to be. And it starts with, just like you say, us getting woke. So thank you so much, buddy.
Brother, I appreciate you and send my best to your family. Give them a big hug. I mean, you guys are important leaders in the Latino community in Dallas, so we're going to do whatever we do, we're going to do it together.
Thanks a lot, Rafael. You get out there and get them.
Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Hey guys, I want to just thank you so much for joining us today with this incredibly important show that we had. And I want to thank our guests, Ramiro Luna and State Rep Rafael Anchia, for their contribution to the show. And I want to just kind of reach out to all you folks kind of listening today. Rafael said something incredibly powerful. We need to get woke, as the kids say. I don't know any kids who say that, but I'm sure he's right when he says it. But it's very true. In all honesty, things are happening around us that we need to be able to respond to. Not only people of color, but everywhere. Everywhere in this country, certainly here in the state of Texas, our Constitution is constantly being under attack. If you guys are in a situation where you feel like your civil rights have been violated, there's a number of groups and organizations that can kind of help out. Give us a call at our office, and hopefully we can help you, direct you to where you might find some assistance. Our number here at the office is 214-740-1628. If you start seeing any of these things, we're hearing some scary stories about things happening. So if you guys have any issues, you feel free to give us a call. Fern, thank you so much as always. Remember, guys, join us every Friday from 1 to 3 on Law for the People here on the Fishbowl Radio Network. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.
The law offices of Eric Cedillo, a professional corporation, a firm that handles legal matters in personal injury, auto and truck accidents, wrongful death, on-the-job injuries, criminal felony and misdemeanor, family law, divorce, and child custody. The law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas at 214-740-1628. That's 214-740-1628. Find them on the web at cedillolaw.com. That's cedillolaw.com.